She has.
Can you tell everyone why these particular hybrids specifically refer to us as kind of parentals in nature?
Yeah. So again, I'll do my best to be concise, and I always like to preface, and I'll do myself to kind of offer the idea of the allegory as well, because it is such a beautiful story that, again, it doesn't matter if it's actually true or not. But Bella and her civilization, which is known as, we call the Yahyel. And also there are different civilizations within their greater family as well, that they say they are the product of what we understand to be and what we have called the abduction scenarios. That there is a very different parallel reality of humanity, of planet Earth, that essentially fell into a heavy, deep reliance on technology and fear-based belief systems, that further separated them from nature, and into, in ways, what we could very kind of like loosely translate as a more masculine way of doing things. Loosely.
Whenever you cut off emotions, I think you're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Far Out with Faust. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm sitting here with an old friend of mine. Her name is Gita Rose. Gita spent the first half of her life doing musical theater. She went to school right here in New York City at the American Musical Dramatic Academy, but then she really started to find her calling and use her gifts as a vocal channel and a metaphysical teacher. She's also a yoga teacher, and she often combines asana yoga and meditation concepts in her sessions with her clients. And, full disclosure, guys, I spent a week with Gita in Hawaii on a meditation contact retreat, and I learned so much from her. She's an incredible human being. She's incredibly wise for her years, and I'm super proud to call her friend, and I'm excited to introduce her to you guys. Gita, thank you so much for beaming in and taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for creating this space for more people to connect and share their stories. And yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you. So Gita, where to begin? My God, I watched your episode with our friend Reuben. Some of you guys will remember Reuben. He was one of my first guests on the show. And him and Gita were the ones who arranged the retreat that we had gone on right before the world kind of said, all right, time out, everyone. No one's allowed to do anything. It was March of 2020. And I was rewatching your episodes with him. You guys shot such beautiful footage in Hawaii, and my God, it really came out great.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. What Reuben Langdon does in terms of his storytelling and cinematography is amazing. And everything worked out in a very synchronistic way that led to us actually having to reshoot the episode. So we were able to do it in Hawaii, which was something that was unexpected, that ended up being really beautiful. And yeah, as far as I know, he's got the about half of his third season now of Interview with Extraterrestrials that is available on Vimeo, and fingers crossed Gaia will pick up the third season for him again. But yeah,
I hope they do. I told Reuben, and I'm sure I told you during the event, it's been a while since we spoke, but that show was it's a phenomenal show on Gaia. It's called, as she just said, Interviews with Extraterrestrials, and you got to check it out if you're into channeled material and everything ET lore and metaphysics. You cannot go wrong with this show. In fact, you can only go right. I think that's safe to say.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think there's something there for everyone if they feel called to explore. And I know that a lot of people have found me as a result of that. It's given me a bit more exposure. Absolutely.
Oh, that's
So,
great to hear. That's fantastic to hear.
yeah,
So I want to give our listeners who aren't familiar with you a little bit of a background besides
sure.
the paragraph that I shared with them about your experience, as a young adult and how you came into this. But um, I'm trying to think of where to start. I know that things really got exciting for you and changed when you met Jen Thompson. I thought that would be a perfect place to start for Far Out with Faust.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, well, agreements with friends and with people happen exactly the way that they need to in perfect timing. And we're always being those mirrors for each other and those activators and yeah, she was definitely an individual that came into my life in a perfectly synchronized moment. Absolutely. Growing up, I'd always been connected to the idea of imagination. I think in ways I always innately remembered the structure of existence that the hybrids offer to us, but I didn't necessarily have the label for that. I didn't have any awareness at all of the existence of extraterrestrials in one timeline that I'm able to remember.
Right.
Since coming online, we might say I now have memories of simultaneous timelines that more and more are merging, and I remember things when it's relevant. But in we might say the main continuous timeline of story that I'm operating from, I didn't have an awareness of extraterrestrials.
Right.
It was something that, I saw the X-Files, I knew it was a thing, or the
Right.
unsolved mysteries, like are UFOs real? But it
Yeah.
was it was something that I really wasn't very interested in. But I
Right.
had it was like blinders really, I think, put on by myself until my higher self, my higher mind, until it was time for that story to reveal itself. But I always had an understanding of the connection of imagination,
Yeah.
the importance of story structure. Um, and I think it was also because I chose from a very young age to be involved in theater that my neurological net was really kind of wired in a way to be able to support a lot of these concepts that I ended up learning later. So I,
Hmm.
again, just had an innate understanding of the structure of existence, the importance of imagination, knowing that everything happens for a reason. There's no such thing as coincidence. Um,
Right. But you
under,
learned that later, right? I mean, that wasn't something
well,
that.
no, I knew that growing up.
Oh,
That's what
you
I'm
did. Okay. You were way ahead of me.
absolutely, absolutely. And also, again, we all have very specific agreements for each other. We all play the perfect roles in each other's stories. And my mother growing up, especially with theater, because I would be so heartbroken when I didn't get the part that I wanted.
Yeah.
And my mom instilled in me at a really young age, and I do think it's something that she very much believes from her own perspective, that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
If it's not this part, it's because it's something else. Or what did you learn from going to that audition?
Yeah.
So I was trained within the context
Well,
of
that's
theater,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, at a very young age to be able to understand things that many of us perhaps think in kind of a conceptual way, or we say it like a philosophy,
Or
but
intellectually,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. But it's not maybe not something that we operate from in a visceral sense, in a deep knowing. But yeah, because of how I was raised, because of my involvement in theater and many beautiful spirits that I met, I also had interactions with loved ones who had
Hmm.
crossed over very early.
Okay.
So my
So you had
neurological,
some medium or some psychic
yeah,
experiences even when you were young.
yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also with elementals,
Hmm.
different fays or fairies or nature spirits, as we might call them. Um, and yeah, again, different spirits that had crossed over. My grandmother, a director, mentor friend of mine a little bit later in life. So everything was very kind of strategically laid down from my perspective to create a foundation for when it was time for the invitation from the hybrids to reveal themselves. I was really prepared in a way for it.
Yeah, and Jen Thompson was she was a what kind of a reader was she? She was like
Well, she was perfectly cast at being herself, first and
okay.
foremost.
Yeah.
The idea of spirituality and different concepts had already been a part of her, and perhaps extraterrestrials had already been a part of her exploration.
Yeah.
But really, in that moment, she was just perfectly cast to be who she needed to be in that moment for me. And we all do that for each other all the time. We're doing that for each other right now.
Of
we
course,
do it. We have amazing agreements with the barista that makes our coffee, and we might not necessarily have some type of very expansive moment with the barista, but in a way that we would define it. But something that magnificent is still happening.
Right.
So
I remember you saying that she said something to you, and it was, some things resonate so profoundly with you, and she said something to you that you were like, and I've had so many of those moments, and I love to hear you when you told that story.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I'm just wanting to, she has her own business and clientele and everything. But a lot of what I like to do is to kind of rip away the mysticism of things that we create that make these different experiences kind of, when we hear these stories, sometimes it sounds so far out, or pun intended. So for people listening, I always do my best to really ground the idea and that these types of mystical experiences are found everywhere and anywhere, depending on what lens we choose to see things through. But yes, I did have a moment that really was quite synchronistic and beautiful, where Jen revealed that she is able to see things, to see ghosts, to see spirits. She's the only other person that I'd ever met in physical reality that also had these experiences. She operates much like a traditional clairvoyant, we might say, being able to read people's auras and energies. But also I've got to say that it was something that was both of us coming together in a way. It was the appropriate timing. My frequency and my agreement was ready to show myself to myself. And Jen agreed from our friendship, from the agreement, to serve as that mirror. And again, that's what we're doing all the time. You're never going to align with any specific teacher or healer or clairvoyant or whatever the healer position is that's going to pull something out of you. That's not how it's working. We are operating from a frequency where it's already right there, and they're operating as the mirror to reflect it back to us. Again, it can be a trained clairvoyant, it can be a barista at your local Starbucks.
It really happens all the time, and with everyone. Yeah,
exactly. So while she was serving as that mirror for me in a particular reading that she was giving me, she said, "Oh, you have all of these ETs in your space." And at that time, I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, what are you talking about?
Like
ETs?
the movie?
Yeah. And like, in my space? Like, what are you talking about, lady? And she was like, well, I mean, aliens. And when I say in your space, I mean like in your aura, in your energetic field. And in that moment, again, because I was ready to reveal myself to myself, that interaction with the mirror in that moment, that was Jen, removed those blinders that I was talking about earlier. And I had a memory. I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Duh. Aliens exist.
It's like how it's always hard for me to imagine how I thought the other thing after a moment like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're like, how did I ever think that it could have been any other way
Yeah.
than this? It's such a profound moment when that happens, you know?
Yeah, and it was something that was very simple and natural in a way where it just felt so comfortable, where I
Yeah,
was like, oh yeah, that's what human is. Like human is a mixture of terrestrial and alien DNA.
that's right.
Um, from from my perspective, from the hybrids perspective, another thing that I always really appreciate about the hybrids and Bella in particular is they always remind us of the importance of story. And it really doesn't matter if something is actually quote unquote truth. What matters, or what's creating the matter within our reality, is it applicable?
Right.
And the more that I share Bella's message and their story of where they say they come from and how they're connected to us, or the story of humanity, the more that I really know within my own experiences that it is through story that humans learn, that we tap into the innate wisdom and the core concepts that unite us. And especially with these ideas of, and I'm sure your audience is kind of,
Yeah.
maybe integrated in their own ways. But I think for those of us moving forward that maybe are in interactions with a lot of people that don't believe the same thing,
Hmm.
um, understanding the importance of story and being able to offer things in a way that is always allowing individuals to feel into the allegory, to
Right.
be able to utilize the morals or the archetypal information that can ignite us. So
Right.
for me in particular, I really like the idea that the idea of a hybrid is really kind of just a blend of
Hmm.
things. It's
It's usually the hybrid tends to be a species with more vigor than its predecessors. It's a wonderful word, and we use
yeah,
it in so many ways, but it
yeah.
definitely implies a diversity of either genes or whatever you want to blend together for strength.
Absolutely. And I guess what I'm speaking to is something where I've kind of taken it and where I'm usually directed from the hybrids is to remove all of the um, details as much as possible, to be able to hone in on what is, at least from my perspective, what is the core offering of the story. Um, and for me, hybrid itself can be many different composites. It
Hmm.
can be like many different generations, like you're saying. But essentially, and especially kind of in this case, simply enough, it's the blending of polarity. It's the blending of opposites. It's the blending of a type of contrast, which is from the hybrid's perspective, as I understand it, a depiction of creation itself. For duality always exists, always, even at the highest level of any differentiated level of incarnation, there's still the ability to perceive some aspect of duality or
Right.
contrast.
Or else
And
you're in source. I mean, you're back to oneness, which
yeah,
is removed from
yeah,
duality. It has to be removed from duality. It is oneness, right? I mean, it's if you think about it that way, it's a little
yeah,
easier to understand the
yeah,
concept.
exactly. And so there's the pinpoint of the observation of that duality that creates a trinity. And in a way, the again, in an allegorical kind of metaphorical way, that pinpoint of the observation is a blending where the two lines of contrast merge. So
Right.
that pinpoint, that place of free will, the place of opportunity, the place of choice is in a way its own type of hybrid. So again, I like to kind of get kind of almost very artistic and cerebral with these things, but
I
in a
mean,
way,
but I love that but the way that you're talking about these concepts is it's fascinating, even to me, and I've heard a lot, so it's another way to put things in a perspective for people who are just coming into an awareness of all of
mhm,
these concepts,
mhm.
and they're vital, they're very
Yeah.
important concepts, I think. So
Yeah, absolutely.
keep
So in a
going.
way, like creation itself is kind of a hybrid. It's a kind of hybrid.
Yeah.
It's always a merging and a blending and a cacophony and an amalgamation of contrast and duality of what, especially in our civilization, what we might perceive as the self and the other coming together, making a third experience.
Right.
The known and the unknown, always in existence and coming together.
We're
and
going to
making
talk
a
about
point of
that,
navigation.
definitely.
So there's lots of different ways that you can slice how we might define polarity, but in terms of hybrid being human and interacting with different types of hybrids, from my experience, it can be really beneficial to boil it down and deduce it to perhaps some of the most core aspects of it. And then from there, from that utilization of the offering of the mechanics,
Right.
then we raise our frequency enough to align with any and all details within the story that might
Sure.
actually be relevant for us.
The details come later.
Yes.
That's been my experience as well, you know, and it's so funny because we crave the details, right? We want to know all the nitty gritty. And it's like, well, first dude, learn the language, first learn how to communicate and learn the nuance. And then
absolutely
you may find the details, you know?
Yes, we absolutely find the details. And the fun is that the details never end. And that's getting, we might say, fully comfortable with aspects of what we might define uncomfortable.
That's right.
That's fully embracing the mystery within inside of ourselves, because the revelation of details never ends.
Yeah. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
It was, again, since we're kind of talking about a little bit of, ancient history, and so many of us are, again, it's a product of the human mind to want to know how to classify and box things, because then we feel comfortable.
Right.
In one of my discussions with a representative from the hybrid lineage, another physical channel, I asked, who are the Anunnaki's Anunnaki?
Right. Good question.
Yeah. And he said, we don't know. Wow. We have ideas, but we don't know. And to me, I was just like, oh, of course, of course we don't, because it never ends.
Wow.
And it's not about the specifics. It's not about the story in that way. It's about the offering of the allegory, always. And that's something too that Bella has been quite honest with me as well, where she's like, you still forget, you think we know everything. We don't. There's always more to explore, and those details are constantly revealing themselves. That's what it makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
To be an aspect of the all that is. Yeah.
So just so our listeners have an idea of what we're talking about, Gita is in touch with and facilitates communication with an aspect of her higher self. And she's come to know this aspect as Bella, an ET human hybrid. And so she is part of Gita's being. Well, go ahead. You better explain it then, because I'm just trying to give them a picture, because they have no idea who Bella is or what we're talking about. Some of them, they're going to be like,
what? Yeah.
What's going on here?
I'll do my best to be as concise as I can. So yes, in one way of looking at things, we are always connecting to an aspect of the collective higher mind. You and me are doing that right now. We're always, in a greater sense, connecting to an aspect of our, I forget what the word was that you actually used, but an aspect of our higher consciousness.
Right.
You and me, again, are doing that right now. But also, you are your own differentiated entity, and I am my own differentiated entity. So in the case of Bella and myself, and again, it really doesn't matter if we believe that it is true or not. It's always about, does the information serve us? Is the story somewhat interesting enough to catch our curiosity to allow us to explore? but as I've kind of understand it over the years, because I understand enough of the structure, and also I've had synchronicity where I'm like, okay, there's no doubt that this person is very real.
Yeah.
In terms of the mechanics of what's happening, it does involve a brief explanation of what we refer to as the oversoul. So utilizing my hand as an example, my body is the all that is. And the all that is then fractures itself, we might say, because that's what it does. It's always a fractal of itself, into different collectives, different oversouls, oversouls of oversouls of oversouls of oversouls. So we might think that my arm is a oversoul of an oversoul, and then going into the palm is the more specific oversoul, and then on my fingers we have differentiated incarnations. Now there's many more than 5.
Right. Would you say that so Faust, this personality that I am in this moment of now, would you say that that is an example of that?
Yes. So you are a differentiated incarnation that is an offshoot from your oversoul that is essentially connected to an oversoul of an oversoul that is then connected to the all that is. Another analogy that Bella uses that sometimes can be helpful for us to kind of wrap our mind around it, because also what this is doing is this is ripping away a lot of the illusion that we create in terms of the idea of reincarnation, because in actuality, it's incarnation. It's happening at the
That's
same
so
time.
true.
We can have the experience that we create where we need a sense of continuity, such as a child remembering that he was his grandfather in a past life.
Right.
That can happen from time to time as a story that is operating within the illusion, because again, it's a story that helps us to understand, oh, these things are even possible. It provides synchronicity in an undeniable way where we go, oh, whoa. But in terms of the actual physics and the mechanics of creation, it's not happening in a continuous line like that.
Right.
It's all here and now at the same time.
Right. That's so true. What you said. I mean, I've never even. There really is no reincarnation. There's just incarnation. There's just incarnation.
There's just incarnation,
I mean?
and we can and it's always both, and that's the fun play of the paradox that we're always in, is because we can absolutely have the experience of reincarnation, but in terms of the physics of it and the mechanics of it, it's not what is actually occurring. And a lot of the times because then things like karma and these kind of cycles and carrying trauma over, again, it's not actually part of the function.
No, it's not. And I just got back from a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and he said, people think that karma is this wheel and humans are running on it. He said, but the truth is that all you have to do to get off the wheel is realize that you're on it and step off of it. He's like, that's karma. Karma is just you having to integrate and heal so that you become fully aware and expand your consciousness, and it's like that's how, that's the only thing keeping people stuck in this idea of karmic debt and hell and heaven and all these patterns that they're in, are realizing that the patterns are an illusion and that you can remove yourself from them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that essentially we can make new choices that then align us with a different vibration, where then the mirror of the external reality reflects in a different way. Because the concept of karma, in the sense of what you put out, you get back, that's very true.
Yeah, cause and effect. Absolutely.
Exactly. In terms of the reflective nature of reality. But for another analogy for people to play with or understand the aspect of incarnation and these parallel life streams, Bella also uses the idea of a tree. So it's one tree, and then there's the trunk with different branches, and then oftentimes, depending on the tree, but oftentimes there's little sub branches, and then little twigs, and then little families of clusters of leaves. And so those little family clusters of leaves would be our oversoul, where we have technically an infinite amount of incarnations.
That's right.
But from time to time, it can be relevant for individuals to be able to feel or see or remember or have contact with other fingers or other extensions coming from the oversoul or other leaves that are simultaneously existing. So that's what Bella and me are aspects, very differentiated incarnations that are sharing aspects of the same oversoul. And she says that she is a member of what we would define as perhaps the most recent or one of the most recent hybridization programs. She views herself as our descendant, as our children in a way. She has...
Can you tell everyone why these particular hybrids specifically refer to us as kind of parentals in nature?
Yeah. So again, I'll do my best to be concise, and I always like to preface, and I'll do myself to kind of offer the idea of the allegory as well, because it is such a beautiful story that, again, it doesn't matter if it's actually true or not. But Bella and her civilization, which is known as, we call the Yahyel. And also there are different civilizations within their greater family as well, that they say they are the product of what we understand to be and what we have called the abduction scenarios. That there is a very different parallel reality of humanity, of planet Earth, that essentially fell into a heavy, deep reliance on technology and fear-based belief systems that further separated them from nature and into, in ways, what we could very kind of like loosely translate as a more masculine way of doing things. Kind of loosely.
Whenever you cut off emotions, I think you're heading in that direction.
Yeah. And so essentially the planet became uninhabitable, and they needed to tunnel inside of the Earth to be able to live. They then began
because they became infertile. They became...
a little bit later down the line, but yes, they morphed themselves. They essentially de-evolved to a space where they were no longer able to naturally procreate. And in a really kind of beautiful twist of the story, they realized that they had kind of gone so far in the wrong direction, quote unquote, that the path of least resistance was to actually now consciously shut off their emotions that much more. So they could operate from a completely hive mentality to be able to create what we now know as the hybridization program. But again, I think this is really kind of beautiful and interesting, because if we imagine it like an Ouroboros, like the snake eating its own tail, they realized that they had gone so far in one direction that it was truly the path of integration and the path of least resistance just to go for it all the way, rather than turning around and seeing if they could direct themselves.
And they had a lot of help on the way. They weren't left. I mean, they didn't. Go ahead. You tell. We might say they kind of enlisted people. They hired people. There's also again, this gets into a lot more of the kind of galactic history that really at this point isn't relevant. But but everyone's curious. Give me a little bit. People just love the people who... I know, we love
to distract ourselves, don't we?
Of course. It's they're thirsty for it because they hear a little bit and they're like, wait a minute, what happened?
Basically, again, it's a representation of the story that keeps continuing. So there's different
of course,
there's different galactic councils or different individuals from different societies that have played roles in many different hybridization agendas. So when this happened, there were different civilizations and things that were put in place enough, we might say, to be able to aid and assist humanity in this different timeline and to aid and assist humanity in our timeline. And so simplistically enough, the grays, as we refer to them, or in this specific lineage, we might say the word that has been brought through to refer to this specific type of gray, because there are actually many different types of grays.
Yes.
But the word for this specific race is Mazeh, which is actually a Hebrew word that means "what's that?" That the word also translates to hunger, emptiness. So I prefer to refer to this specific lineage of the grays as the Mazeh. So essentially the Mazeh were able to jump through time and space to be able to align with different versions of their oversoul, different versions of themselves, essentially in parallel versions of Earth, as well as different versions of their ancestors, to be able to essentially extract viable DNA, to be able to create these different hybrids such as the Sasani and the Yahyel. And in these encounters, the humans are also able to be exposed to different density and dimensional shifts that allow our own DNA, our own hybrid or Anu DNA, to come more to the surface. But the point of the story that I really like to look at is the agreement that in our timeline we have made to look into the mirror of ourselves, to look into the mirror of our shadow, to look into the mirror of our own denial, to be able to, again, utilize the allegory to make very different choices, to be able to know the importance of our connection to nature, to be able to know the importance of our connection to our emotions, to be able to know us as an extension of nature itself. Again, it's such a good story that it doesn't matter if it's actually true or not. It's how it inspires us to take new action in each and every moment. And I always like to phrase it this way, because for individuals that very much know this to be true, that very much have memory and experiences that perhaps might be very traumatic, because we didn't have the understanding, we didn't have the story, so there isn't a context of what is going on. So when these experiences are happening in the earlier days, it might have been very traumatizing. There's also people that have had a new type of experience as we understand the story. There's beautiful, very polite interactions that are
interactions. There's all kinds of interactions. And but so what I think, Gita,
well, let me just say, I just want to finish my thought. Just
go ahead.
But I think it doesn't matter if you've had traumatic experiences, if you've had these new type of experiences, if you haven't had experiences, if you don't want to believe this is true or whatever it is. The thing that does unite us, and that people have been told in either experiences, and if people don't want to adopt this as true, we can all agree that it is about utilizing our emotions and taking care of the planet and being stewards of our own nature in many different ways. So that's the unifying offering that runs through the story, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. So thanks for letting me throw that in.
You're so welcome. And I'm sorry I got excited. But and the first and most important message, that I can remember when I first heard a human channel a being from the Sasani culture, which is, or the Sasani, whatever, what you would call them. It wasn't Bashar. So Daryl Anka was a guest on my show, and you guys saw and met Daryl, but he channels a being called who he calls Bashar, and he is a individual from an entity from the Sasani. And so the first person I heard channel, the first thing out of his mouth was another being from this race. And what he said was that you have to allow others their truth and their perspective without invalidating it. That's what we do. And that's what we notice and observe humans, at this point in time. This was 40 years ago. Not that so much has changed, maybe 30 years ago, having a lot of trouble doing, allowing people their truth and understanding that it's their perspective, and it's not on me to invalidate it because I may not agree or believe in it. Right. I mean,
Absolutely.
This allowance is a form and expression of compassion. And just like you wouldn't tell a toddler or a child that what they're saying is wrong because it may be, you allow them. But if we could stay in that mentality as we get older, we would have a lot less strife, conflict, and war in our society, and
always striving for how can we do our best to empathize, or to be able to see it from their side, and to be able to be vulnerable and courageous enough within ourselves to, again, strip out all of the erroneous details and look for the thing that unites us, because somewhere deep in the core of whatever the narrative is, there's going to be a core truth. It's just how we operate. There's going to be something that is extracted, right? There is a lesson that's there always. Yeah.
And the truth is, and I find this more and more, we all have, we are these incredible individuations, of divinity. That's what I believe. That's what I understand. And that's what I experience. But when we think of, my God, how could they think that, we find ourselves, with this such a degree of separation from this person. But the truth is, I believe deep down that we're so much more alike than we could ever imagine. And that the experiences that we're sharing each and every day in our lives, that if we only had an inkling of just how much we're alike, even that person who we could never imagine, because we know their perspective and we may not agree with it, but even if we had any idea, we would be like, man, we just got to talk because we have so much in common. It's like, I think that's kind of the one of the best and the biggest secrets that humanity is yet to realize, just how much we all have in common. And I think it's going to really allow a lot more of us to integrate and kind of come together on things that we find ourselves often at odds with, in society. When we realize that, I just think it's there,
I absolutely agree. And thank you so much for saying that. And it is, it's just simply enough choosing to focus on the things that unite us, and choosing to focus on things that are aspects of the one heart, while being able to use the actual separation and then also the illusion of the separation to further know ourselves and to further investigate and explore. But I think that really is kind of the golden ticket for us to be able to move through these times in the most harmonious way possible, is to absolutely focus on the things and to look for the things that make us similar and unite us,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a choice each and every day. And I remind my 10-year-old, I feel like I spent all morning reminding him of this, that the choice that he makes about how he's going to see something affects how he's going to experience it. And so, this morning he had basketball, which at this point, I'm still kind of like, yes, you're going to go and you're going to use your body and you're going to play a game, which you're getting so much better at, and you're starting to enjoy yourself doing it. But you don't want to go, you don't want to stop watching, your cartoon or whatever. And and he kind of like, he'll kick the can all the way to practice until I get him to, to get present and just put himself into what he's doing. And then he finds joy. And I said, no, isn't that amazing when you stopped when you just got present how much joy you were able to have, and you stopped, like, oh my God, this is taking for, is it over yet? You just,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it amazing how that works? And he's like, yeah. But it's like, it goes
Beautiful.
for everything,
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the present. It's why we call it the present. It's the
It's
greatest
like,
gift. Yeah.
absolutely. No, it really is. And,
Yeah.
you know, I just wanted to say something to you, Gita. It takes a lot of courage to do what you do, and to be in your heart and tell your story and share Bella and your experience with her, and what you continue to learn, and to continue to be a student and a teacher is it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing balance, and like, it takes a lot of guts to stand, in your power and in your truth, and speak the way that you do, and say that, look, this is my experience. You can take it or leave it. I'm only leaving it here in case it may help you to be of service.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible thing
Oh,
to me.
thank you. And I really appreciate that and thank your words and I take that in, and then also not wanting to sound deflective or to not take that in, but I know what you're saying and I understand the sentiment. But really, sure, there is a certain level of courage, but I'm always going to loop it in some way. When we're following the formula, when
I
we're
love the formula. Yeah.
which I'll also state too, I'm in no way officially affiliated with Bashar Communications. Bella does say that she comes from the same larger family as Bashar, but I'm in no way officially affiliated with Bashar Communications. And the concept of the formula is what the hybrids offer to us as being a navigational tool for how we create our reality. From their perspective, it is the physics that allows us to maneuver through our physicality. And it's following our joy in every moment, fully committing to our character, to ourselves, to the best of our ability, without any insistence or assumption that anything is going to happen as a result of taking said action. Always being in that state of curiosity, and regardless of what we do align with, to stay in an integrative response, because in actuality, everything is happening through us, for us, and we would not align ourselves with any reality that is not there to some degree for our benefit. And so,
In other words, let go of your expectations, and understand that whatever comes is going to be absolutely for your greatest and highest good. Don't put judgment on it, even if it doesn't show up the way you imagine that it might or thought it could. Let go of that, and it will continue to evolve for you. Go ahead, keep going.
Absolutely. And so, in terms of, again, really wanting to take in and appreciate, what you are saying, but also I've come to find that when we really embody the form that we love, when we are truly allowing ourselves to be our authentic selves just for the sake of being ourselves, the synchronicity supports us in a way where it doesn't take that much courage. It shouldn't take that much courage just to be yourself.
Right.
And again, it's the mechanics of, if you're really applying these ideas that they present, that really what I just said, that idea of the formula, that 4-step process, that's it. That's it. It's it. We don't
Tried
need
and true.
anything. Yeah. When we fully understand that, we really do enter into a flow of understanding of ourselves that, sure, yeah, okay, from time to time, there's going to be a little bit of a push.
Right.
There's
Yeah, I
the
understand. Yeah.
there's the continuing discernment of what is our anxiety and what is our, excitement. But the more that we refine ourselves, really, the easier it gets to be ourselves. Why would we want it any other way?
Right.
So,
It's
while
true.
I understand what you're saying, but we can enter into a flow of such true contact and connectivity with ourselves that
Yeah.
it
And
flows.
that's
Yeah.
where you are now. But to get here, all I'm wanting to do is acknowledge the tremendous
Oh,
amount
thank
of
you.
courage and commitment it took to embrace this part of you in this life. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all do it in our own ways all the time. And it's something that I suppose it's just a way that we can choose to utilize and alchemize energy. And I think, again, this is something that I learned from a very early age doing theater. Um, you're always a little nervous. You always
Yeah.
have kind of those butterflies, but it's not about getting rid of the butterflies. It's about learning how to train them to fly in formation.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And then it becomes a fuel, then it's fun.
Oh, yeah.
You know the sensation.
Absolutely.
It never leaves, and then you're like, oh wait, I like this. Okay, cool.
It's such it's
Yeah.
a great analogy for so many things, but life included. When we get over, because people, you could learn to act in you could read a few books and practice for a while, but when you can learn all the technique in the world, but getting in front of people and having to master those butterflies when because what happens when you get in front of, for most people, is this flight or fight kicks in, and all of a sudden everything that you thought you had a handle on goes out the window. And it's kind of like, just like when life kicks it into overdrive, and all of a sudden we are a reaction to our bodies and to fear, and we find that we can't navigate the way we practiced or thought we could, right? But then what happens in theater, and Gita can attest to this, is it starts being really fun, because you know what you know, and the challenge becomes to stay present and really forget what you know, so that you can be absolutely in the moment and enjoy the surprises that come from it, right? Like, it's
Absolutely. And it's all a learning process. And it is that it is the point of the process itself. Any process that we're on, utilizing our emotions, the energy in motion, and this is why it always goes back to the formula. Those aspects that have that fight or flight response, right? That are interpreting the energy in motion as anxiety, because
mhm.
it's also excitement. It's the same energy in
Yeah,
motion being filtered through different belief systems.
exactly.
So
Yes.
the belief systems and the aspect of self that is interpreting that energy in motion as the flight or fight response, what those parts of us need is to witness us taking action, and to receive the reflection of, oh, that wasn't so bad, or oh, they did make fun of me and I was okay with it, or I learned
Right.
something about myself, or how about that, I was vulnerable in myself on stage and people loved it.
Right.
Like those, and it can be in any and all experience. And again, that's why it always goes to the formula, to be able to take the action, to be able to see the reflection in our reality, so that then those denser aspects of self can be integrated with the higher belief systems, or we
Mhm.
can let go of those beliefs. And then literally what happens is we're reprogramming our neurological net.
That's right.
And so again, I very much understand why my higher self was like, you're going to be in theater before you talk to the
Me too.
aliens,
Yeah.
because it absolutely laid a foundation in the brain where I'm sure that you understand. And I really feel it's really something that is so empowering, perhaps for all people to kind of take in and think about in their own way. We respond to vulnerability.
Yeah.
All of us fear that, we're going to be judged, that we're going to be persecuted, that we're going to be whatever it is, those fears. We all have those. And also at the same time, we all respond and appreciate to vulnerability.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
and,
absolutely. It is a
yeah,
universal, it's a powerful, it's part of the emotional spectrum, but it's part of our experience. And it's it's so underestimated how wonderful it is,
yeah.
in our, and it's the reason I'm talking to you. Honestly, it's,
Aw.
it's I got on this path because I had a very big problem allowing myself to be vulnerable in front of people. And
Oh,
I
cool.
couldn't, what kind of an actor could I be when I couldn't squeeze a drop,
Mm,
and I
mm,
had to figure out why. That's what put me on this
mm.
path so long ago.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, so it's ironic, and it's great that you
It's
mention it.
perfect. Yeah, and it can happen in so many different ways, whether it's being honest with your friends and family when the timing feels right, that you believe, you've been contacted by aliens, whether it's starting a podcast, whether it's
Right.
telling someone ahead of you in the grocery store, "Hey, I really like your sweatshirt."
Yeah. Yeah. Just being honest
Yeah,
and
like whatever it is, and then being able to, in a consistent pattern, either get very integrative reflections back or something that, is a little,
right.
skewed, but allows us the opportunity to do the integration. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't be attached to any kind of response that you may get, because everybody is in their own place, and that's a
Hmm.
reflection of where they're at. You may say that to
Hmm.
someone, and they may look, especially in New York City, they may look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
If you say, "I love your sweatshirt," like, why are you talking to me? Or do you have evil plans for me?
Right.
People are living in the state that they're in, and it has nothing to do with you. I'm kind to people, and I often find myself talking to people who don't respond, because I live in a city that's very much in a fear state, and when
Mm,
that's a survival state, and so you're not, it's not a very conducive state for kind of friendly conversation in passing, and people don't want to get close in this city anymore, and it's a shame, but it doesn't, I don't do it because I'm trying to, I'm just being me. And sometimes people are
mm.
wonderful, and they turn to me like I just, gave them some oxygen and they were deprived. And other people are like, why is he spraying toxic gas on me? I got to get the hell out of here.
Mm,
But I let go of all the, expectations, and realize that it's not about me. Yeah.
yeah. And the interesting thing too is then we kind of start getting into the idea perhaps of different versions of worlds that really are manifesting through us. Um, and at least in my experiences, because I've lived my life in kind of such a theatrical way, just being who I am, that I really do think it builds like a muscle, it builds over time. Because what we are allowing ourselves to do is be more authentic, more reflective with
Mm.
ourselves first and foremost. And the way that it works, it might take some time, some practice, because we need the experience of continuity to know that we have changed. But eventually, what will happen is that we then align with a different external reality. So we never actually change the world that we're on. We're changing ourselves to a
That's
degree
right.
where then we align with a different version of reality that has already existed. So the more that we play, play is such a big thing, especially with Bella. She really stresses that the more that we just allow ourselves to play, again, regardless of how anyone might respond, we're just being ourselves because we want to be ourselves and we don't need any other reason than that. The more that we do that, the more refined we become. And then the more we align with absolutely different versions of reality. So,
Totally true.
and it
It's
is in a way always, it isn't about us and it is about us.
right. That's the
Always.
paradox. Yeah. But when you start doing these things, what you imagined were your greatest desires, what you had on your vision board, or whatever it was, is going to change dramatically. And you're going to look back on that old vision board and you'll be like, what the hell is that thing doing up there? Really? This is what I
Yeah.
thought I wanted, because you
Sure.
realize how kind of silly it was to have this desire. I mean, it's not silly at the time, of course,
Well,
but
no,
I'm
but
not trying to, I shouldn't put a judgment on it, but it's like things reprioritize in a way that is
yes,
more heart-centered and less material.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a beautiful way to say it. And And again, I think it kind of does go back to finding the core translations of what story is being able to offer us. When we're receiving a desire, maybe it's a new Ferrari or whatever it is, that we might look back at it in a couple of years later and be like, oh God, I was so materialistic. What was I thinking? But if we translate, well, what is the symbol of the Ferrari? It's
Right.
abundance, it's freedom, it's moving fast, it's being something
True.
that is refined, or that is kind of high class, or whatever it is. Those aren't bad things. Those are things that your higher self is sending you through the symbol of the Ferrari, so you can utilize that thing
Very good point.
as the translation to further know yourself. Our desires are there for an absolute reason. And again, it's not insisting that your manifestation of your desire is going to look like a Ferrari.
That's right.
It's utilizing, oh, this is the symbol of what it feels. And it might be a Ferrari, it might be a free Honda. Like, who knows? Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I've had some of the most profound experiences, not, realizing that, oh man, like the way that I came into interaction with this was like through like this, the most simple desire that I would have put a judgment on, like that was like, material, carnal, primal, and anything that we deem as like, probably not, that's not the best part of me. I shouldn't have been following that part of myself, or listening to that part of myself. Sometimes your soul's going to get you to where you're going one way or the other. And it's just a matter of how it's interpreted. Right. It's been such a profound experience for me, knowing that I kind of like, metaphorically stumbled into one room for all the wrong reasons and met all the right people, only to stumble out and know which room to go to. It's like, thank God I had all those wrong reasons to get to that room, or I would have never met those angels, That's kind of my story.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's another really beautiful depiction of the play of paradox that we're always in. And again, kind of going back to that idea of the Trinity, is there's always these different layers and different ways that we could focus, that we can choose to define things. Always, it's there with everything. And yeah, I would venture to say that most of us, especially those people listening, are able to have an honest differentiation within themselves. Okay, yeah, there's utilizing the idea of the Ferrari. Yeah, there's the idea of, freedom, of all this kind of really integrative translation. Oh, and then also, yeah, sure, I do see there's a bit of like status or greed, or,
Right.
the carnal desires, as you said, it's always part of it. And then to be able to find the experience, like you did, where we can kind of, see that beauty in the nuance, and then be able to very honestly and authentically recognize, oh, how I got to that room was maybe not so making the great choices. So
Right.
next time I can make new choices, but also how amazing would I have landed where I landed if I hadn't made those choices?
Right.
And that just allows us to see the beauty of every moment, and continues us the opportunity to refine our ability to choose, essentially. Right? Yeah.
And but I tell my children all the time, mostly my 10-year-old, my 7-year-old, he's 8 now. My God, he just turned, he's not so interested yet, but my 10-year-old, I'm like, listen, this is your North Pole. This is your South Pole. What do you have in common with the Earth? Like North Pole and South Pole. I'm like, yeah. You know what? When you look out into the solar system and into the universe, that Mars has a North Pole and a South Pole. That every planet that you're looking at, that there's an electromagnetic structure to it, just like you have on your body. In fact, very much reflective of your body. And I show them pictures of their iris, and then of a nebula in the universe, and I'm like, isn't it remarkable how things look alike? And that's because everything is in you that's out there, literally everything. and that you come from the same stuff that made
Mm,
those stars that you see.
mm,
And it's not, that's not allegory either anymore. That's science. We know that that's true. That's very much true about us.
mhm,
And the things go on in our body, are the same kind of like miraculous scientific things that we see happening in the sun,
mm.
and in the greatest spectacles that we can gaze out at. And it's a phenomenal experience. And all I'm saying by sharing that is like, you can stop it and enjoy the ride. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be so, am I on the right path? Am I on
mm.
the right path? But if you're in the flow of things, then you're gonna always be
Mm.
on the right path, even if it feels,
Even when
oh
even
yeah,
when we're not, because just like we are the cosmos, we are the stars, we are the sun, we actually are our path as
yeah,
well. And we can never actually be off it in the greatest sense. Sure, we absolutely create the
literally, you're
experiences.
right. Literally, you are right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. You cannot be off your path because it is yours,
We
you know.
are it, and it is
Yeah.
us, and we are masterful creators. So
Mhm.
we can very much create the experience of, being a little out of alignment just for the sake of coming back into alignment. But yeah, in actuality, we are the path itself. Yeah. And it's fantastical and it's beautiful and it's so much to feel. So much beauty to take in, and I think that's why we oftentimes pull away from the emotional sensations of it and we look for more details, we look for more things
Yeah.
to understand, because we're in a way resisting how much beauty and how much love and
Yeah.
emotion there is to feel.
If it can be
Yeah,
overwhelming,
it
it
can
can
be,
feel very overwhelming,
it can be.
especially,
Yeah.
I think, speaking, from a man's perspective at this
Mm,
moment, it's like, it's unfortunate, but what, we're kind of taught to guard against, keep down, and especially the biggest emotions, and then when you get into the profundity and tsunami that is like the beauty and joy of everything, and it's
mm.
like, wow, it can feel like a lot, but
Yeah. But
um
we're absolutely capable of feeling it and
yeah,
strong enough to feel it. And again, it's a reflection of all that we are. I'd love to share something too that Bella shared with me a couple of years ago that rocked my world. I've been like, oh, I never thought of it that way. So, and again, this is something I'd love to share with people listening to because I think it's a very applicable thing and kind of dovetails what we're talking
sure,
about in,
relevant,
in
yeah,
terms of being able
please.
to feel emotions and how our society in particular has been trained to actually be more comfortable in fear, in freneticism, in worry. We're way more comfortable there, even though we know that we don't prefer it. We are learning how to fully relax into the receptivity of love. We're learning how to do it. Um, so the thing that Bella explained to me in a very kind of like fundamental way, again, reminding me the mechanics of how things operate. So I'll just share that what we perceive as particular emotion is technically energy in motion, like I was saying earlier. And that energy in motion is inherently neutral. Um, Emotion, that which we define as specific feeling, doesn't actually exist on its own. Again, it's passing through the belief systems that then creates the interpretation of any specific energy in motion as a particular feeling. But the cool thing is that it works both ways. And we don't usually hear this being said. So if we have the capacity to feel a denser emotion, again, I'll use anxiety and excitement. If we're
Right.
able to feel anxiety, it's because that energy and motion is passing through denser belief systems. If we are able to feel excitement, it's because that energy is passing through very integrative beliefs. So we hear a lot about find your negative beliefs, find the dense beliefs and let that go. And that is one angle of approach, we could
Right.
say. But also, what she introduced to me was just this idea. I'd never really heard it said, that she's like, honey, there's the opposite side of the coin. Right. Like, I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, because I was feeling so grateful, in such deep appreciation one day. And she goes, hey, do you know what you're believing in order to feel that? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I don't understand. She's like, if you can feel an integrative emotion, it's because you have integrative beliefs. And it was just, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I sat into the emotion and I was like, okay, well, what am I believing is true about myself to be able to feel this amount of gratitude?
Yeah.
I must believe I am worth itself.
Yeah.
I must believe I am an extension of source. And it tapped me into all of this knowing about myself that I could barely hold on to that much integrative
I bet.
emotion.
Yeah.
So that's just something to share. And I practice that a lot in
That's a
my
wonderful, wonderful
practice.
tip.
It's just any time that you're able to feel happiness, to feel appreciation, to feel love, to feel curiosity, we can just train ourselves to go, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What am I believing? What must I know to be true about myself? And as it's been explained to me, that then allows us a clearer toggle, we might
Hmm.
say, between the two polarities. To it, you're essentially gaining more resources in your higher vibrational
Absolutely.
belief system to drive a little lower, to clear out the denser beliefs, to be able to take different action. And we are um building a muscle. You're quite active, and
Absolutely.
we're literally building a different muscle to be
You're
able to hold and withstand higher vibrational
totally. It's
emotion.
like it's
Yeah,
like any technique. And then when just like when you learn to drive, you had to, absolutely be conscious of everything you were doing and look, and then you get better at it. And all of a sudden you can do things kind of without, you just start doing things without having to put so much thought into them, right? Like
absolutely. Yeah.
when we especially in this environment, and the kind of state of things, sometimes and look, this happens growing up as well. When we're in a experience of fear or fright or trauma, our senses heighten, and we immediately start to take a snapshot of our environment, right? And what I love about, and I learned this from Dr. Joe Dispenza, he teaches his students that that is part of our programming in biology. But if you can do that in a state of
Mm,
gratitude, if
mm,
you can stop and the same way you memorize a situation when you're in that state of fear, you can memorize a situation when you're in an elevated state of joy,
mm.
and start to make that your habit, instead of we have this terrible habit of, and I'm sure it has to do with survival and programming and all that, but we replay those old events over and over. And it's like it like, why? I don't know why we do that, but it's like it's such a
Well, because we're learning that we have the ability to choose. Because I know you've heard this before. A habit is no longer a habit once it is recognized as a habit. It then becomes a choice.
right.
And
Well, yeah, yeah. I know the saying. I don't know if I agree with it.
well,
Because
yeah,
because it becomes so ingrained in the subconscious that it's, you can say that it's a choice, but really that person is still operating on that programming, right? You can become aware of the
mm,
programming and it doesn't change it. You can begin to take steps to change it, but it's hard. It's difficult for humans to change sometimes because the programs are so ingrained and they've become so subconscious. That's been my experience anyway.
well, yeah, that might be a different, deeper conversation for another time. But um, I do understand what you are saying, and then also, and again, sometimes I think I just have to own that, because of the different experiences that I've had,
Hmm.
because of how I've grown up, and because of so much of the contact that I remember. It's almost like I like to be very honest and be like, I don't see things or experience things the same way, perhaps, as other humans. Um, I just don't. Because for whatever reason, I've always maintained the belief in absolute malleability. Granted, I also own that I maybe have not had nearly the same amount or anything close to type of childhood trauma that other people have gone through. In ways, my experiences growing up are perhaps more similar to Bella or someone of the hybrid race than they are of human race. So in turn, when things come up like this, where I'm kind of like, I don't agree and I don't understand. I just like to be very honest
Yeah.
because that is kind of where I'm coming from. And again, the specificity in my word is the belief in malleability.
You're right.
So, as a race, what we're learning to do is we're learning to strip our most core beliefs away, especially the idea that it really is as simple as changing our beliefs.
Right.
And so that's something that we're navigating through, and we're learning through, different types of uh neurological science and all this kind of
Oh
stuff, what
yeah.
is actually possible. And I suppose that's again what it really kind of comes back to, is allowing ourselves the freedom
Yeah.
to choose something different, to explore at least the idea that it is simple enough as changing the belief. We don't have to make ourselves believe anything. That's not going to
Right.
work. But we can say, okay, I'm willing to explore that perhaps it really is as simple as making a choice.
Absolutely.
And
And
then
you know what? That
that
can
shifts
become
things.
someone's
Yeah.
experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's a great point. Um, it's a very good point, because I tell you what, if you teach a child that, and teach him from a young age that, as you were taught, then I think that becomes the experience. I think you're a great example of that. But I think, like you also said, and this, I think it's probably a pretty good guesstimate. I think a lot of people are dealing with a lot of childhood trauma, many of them unaware,
Mhm.
that they have that kind of buried. And
Mhm.
I know so many people who don't you know they don't see it. They don't That's the other part of this paradox that is
Mm.
life. I call it the parental paradox. You don't know what you don't know, because
Mm.
many people don't know what a functional family is because
Mm.
they've never experienced one. I mean,
Mhm.
and what's a functional family? If you have love in your family, I think most people consider that a win, and they're like, we were functional. My
Mhm.
parents loved me. But sometimes it's a little more nuanced and complicated. But
For sure.
again,
And
that's probably a different podcast to have
yeah,
the conversation with.
it
But
is. And I can understand to an extent because, I, not to air any of my family's dirty laundry in this way, but there are confusions that I've learned, and absolutely, in
sure.
terms of love and what that means. And we all have our own types of challenges. That's another thing too. Things are difficult only when we say they are difficult.
Yeah.
Um, Challenge is always a word that the hybrids will remind individuals of, because that's something that is a constant.
Yeah.
Challenge is how change depicts itself in physical reality.
Very true. That's
Um,
well put.
and
Yeah.
it's always there. And when we say that it's difficult, then it's difficult. Even the word difficult, difficult.
Right.
It's so full of consonants, it's just kind of an onomatopoeia. It's difficult.
Absolutely.
Whereas challenge has a much different vibration to it. It's an offering. The Chinese
Isn't
characters for challenge are obstacle and reward.
mm.
Um,
And think
and
about that word with the L's. Once you get over the L's, it's
yeah,
it's like smooth
challenge.
sailing.
Yeah, it's
It's
it's more open. It just has a different vibrational translation. It's
totally.
it's a different type of spell. Um, and so I think perhaps when we there is a level absolutely of honoring what is, honoring that
Yeah.
trauma does exist, and then also beginning to see things to the best of our ability, perhaps from a bit more of a multi-dimensional perspective, where, oh, my trauma is challenge, that is change and transformation coming through in a physical reflection.
That's right.
Okay, interesting. So how can I utilize that? How can I then know what I have learned from this experience? How can I utilize it to better know who I am because of the
Right.
experience? And once we have extracted the lesson, once we've utilized to the best of our ability everything that is being offered from all of the different
Right.
lines of experience, then we are, well, literally a different version of ourselves
Absolutely.
that then
Much freer.
that then has the ability to make a new choice, that then has the ability to be that much more in their consciousness, not in their
And
subconscious. Present, absolutely, to then be able to make a new choice, to then get different reflective experiences, to then essentially build new habits. Yeah.
I love everything you just said. It's so well put, and it's so relevant. You know, I had an awesome Dr. Wood. He was on a few episodes ago, and he talked about how when he can get a high performing athlete to be truly present and to really kind of to get over some of the trauma that they, you know, possibly were not looking at or did not extract what they needed to extract from it so that they could move on. He can measure the difference in their lives because they're such high level performance athletes that seconds, you know, become the difference in whether they achieve their, you know, greatest goals or not. He said, but literally they take seconds off their time, you know. All of a sudden they're breaking world records, you know. And it's like, what did they do differently? And I said, why is that? And he said, because when they get into that final stretch, none of their mind is going back to any of that. It's all staying present, right? Because it's all fully integrating, and it's putting all of its resources into the task at hand instead of having some of it, you know, kind of stay siphoned off. And I thought that was pretty amazing of something that he could literally physically measure in some of his you know what I mean? It's so cool.
Totally. That's so cool. That's such a neat like very obvious depiction of how making these types of integrations within the self can boom, like completely shift how we function within the body, how the external reality operates. That's really cool. It's such an obvious depiction of that. Yeah, that's cool.
Cool. It was a very kind of enlightening conversation I had with him, because, you know, everybody wants to kind of be better and feel better. And it's like, when we talk about trauma, it's like people are like, oh man, you know, immediately it's like, of course there's a bit of haven't I had enough of that? So I really want to go, you know, back into the trauma rabbit hole. But, you know, when we talk about performance and having an optimal performance, whether you're a teacher, a painter, a marathon racer, you know, that's something that some people are, that's a simple way to kind of recontextualize maybe some of the things in your life that you were looking at that you're kind of like, I don't, you know, do I want to keep doing that or what? But as long as the eye is towards, you know, becoming the greatest expression of yourself, then by God, you know what I mean? Pick and choose what you want to do that. But that should be the goal, you know?
And the beautiful thing, well, first things first too, is I'm honest as well, that like, and I'm quite paradoxical in the sense that there is the part of me that's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And then there is the part of me that's like, yeah, I deal with a type of depression or compression. Depression is really a type of compression that is leading to the forging of a new diamond. And so sometimes when those states of being naturally arise, where it's just where you are, and there is the whole kind of idea of like, oh, I'm here again. Wasn't I done with this? Well, apparently I'm not done with it because I'm here.
Right.
And it wouldn't be happening if it wasn't relevant. So there's a level of not judging,
Yeah,
surrendering to
acceptance
the
and surrender.
acceptance,
Yeah.
to even then getting into new places of definition eventually can happen
Yes.
where we actually feel the emotions in new and different ways. Um, and then also, and this might be like a little controversial,
Go for it.
because I understand the idea of shadow work. I
Mhm.
understand the idea of clearing out your traumas, really going for it. Now, if that's your genuine excitement, go for it.
Right.
But also, if it's not something that an individual is excited for, you don't have to do that. And it's not spiritual bypassing. It's not. Again, this goes back to the formula. As long as we are making the choices and taking the actions in each and every moment to the best of our ability that really do feel reflective of our best self, the way that the self-contained kit operates is that we are going to then align with any and all experiences that are not part of our excitement, that
Right.
are part of our conditionings or our traumas or whatever it may be. So by continuing to take action on the things that really are reflective of our passion, we are then going to align with, in the most synchronistic, most beautiful ways, the opportunity to refine things and clear traumas or do the type of shadow work that is not part of our passion.
Right.
So that's kind of the absolute intrinsic beauty of the mechanism,
Yeah.
is that, yeah, if it's not your excitement to dive into your trauma, you don't have to continue to do the things that
You
make,
should, and especially if you've already done it a few times, you know?
yeah, you don't have to do the things, go the other side. Go
Right.
to the other, pull yourself up. Again, look for those integrative beliefs. Find things that really do, give you joy. If you're able to get out of bed in the morning, and maybe some
Right.
days you're not, and that's okay. Um, and again, it's a self-perpetuating mechanism. The
Mhm.
more that we commit to whatever we think in each and every moment is the most authentic version of ourselves, we literally put more gas in our engines. We can
Yeah.
go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. And then, yeah, it's just how it works. When
Yeah.
it's time for you to dive into something that perhaps it's time for you to look at, it'll come to you
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a way
It's exactly right.
where you're more resourced for it.
Yeah.
And it can actually eventually be something that is exciting. Be like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that was so
You're like, holy
horrible. I
shit.
learned so much.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
I say it all the time. You don't need to wait for tragedy to start to create changes. You can
Mm,
you can create changes in joy, and in fact, when you do, you can find a lot of magical synchronicities appearing in your
absolutely.
field, in your life, and you're like, wow. You'll just continue to be in wonder at what
Mhm.
happens for you and how fast it can happen for you when you start to align, with your heart, and
Yeah.
and with what you truly want to do, and not maybe what you feel like you have to do, but more
Mhm.
so about looking out for, what's going to make you happy. I understand we all have responsibilities, and we have to find the balance between them, but you
Yes.
can't ignore the self. You can, but it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely. And that's
yeah.
another part of the beauty too. I think you just hit on something that a lot of us, um, just like we're learning how to feel more love, we're also learning what our true heart feels like. A lot of us don't even know the difference between obligation and passion. And again, that's the beauty of the mechanism, is it doesn't matter as long as you choose the thing that just feels that much more like your heart, or if they equally feel like your heart and you really have no idea, flip a coin and do whatever action. And it's absolutely the mechanism, it just is, that it then becomes the reflective process for us to learn through more experiences. Oh, perhaps that was a little bit more of my obligation than it was my true passion.
Right.
Fascinating.
You can be
I'll
a
learn.
little more honest with yourself,
It's just how it works. We
Yeah.
get the next lesson, the next revelation through the next reflection. It's just how it works. And that's just, I really do feel that that's just it's so beautiful. And it's
Yeah.
something that we can really trust and relax in the structure of that and continue to play
Yeah.
to the best of our ability, knowing that there's all these little nuances that will absolutely reveal themselves as part of the structure. Because we get so because it's beautiful. We want to do good.
Right.
We want to be the best we can. So we overthink everything.
Yeah. We got big brains and we use them a little too
Yeah.
much.
We kind of, I mean, in a
Totally.
way, but it's such, I think it's a,
We
I
tend
think
to. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it's a beautiful example of, for most of us, how heart-centered we really are, how deeply we want to be in our integrity, how
Yeah.
deeply we want to be our best selves. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful reflection of how good we are in that way.
Right.
You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I was in a long meditation the other day, I was coming up against, it's like sometimes these thoughts just come out of nowhere and they have greater strength than others. And sometimes it's easier to stay kind of in the void. And I was kind of tuning into my heartbeat and it was going fast considering I was meditating. And so I kind of dropped into my heart center and I just found myself, in that chamber of my heart. And I thought, I was about to have a dialogue with my heart, and I realized that I hadn't done that. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was like, this is crazy. You're like my champion. You're my hero, and this is the first time that I'm telling you, thank you, and I had this conversation with my heart, and then I was like, I'm gonna go, but before I go, could you slow down a little bit? So, and of course, my heart it slowed right down, and I was looking at, like, because I was wearing like a feedback device. I looked at it later, and I could see it at that moment. I registered in a light sleep for about an hour, like right after the conversation. So I know that I was in the zone because my ring thought I was asleep. It was measuring my heart rate.
That's cool. I just got like full body chills. That's beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Might I ask you a question?
Sure.
How did your heart feel, or what did your heart send you when you apologized to it?
It was kind of like a
okay.
It wasn't an immediate, it was like a yeah, here I am. And I was like, I cannot believe. But part of me was like, how I feel about you. You know how I think about you, how I feel about you. You can't deny that, right? And so it was a funny and it ended up being a very loving conversation.
So your heart uncrossed its arms at some point.
Did.
Yeah,
it did. I wasn't going to leave without letting it uncross its arms.
Oh, it's beautiful. And I feel like the heart within all of us does that almost more so, again, as a bit of play. You know what I mean? It's always there. It's always, but it just wants the mind or wants the ego to feel a little bit of that.
Right.
Right. We're just kidding. I got you, boo. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just making sure. Yeah.
And then I thought, like, for people who, who do struggle with anxiety and fear and things where the kind of the heart tends to gallop like a Mustang, a bit out of control, it could very much help to be able to drop in and just have a conversation, just not talk at it, but talk to it, and be, if you're in a dialogue, I think you can really start to, cooperate. I mean, you're working together, right? So it's a cooperation, and at least that was my experience.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And
very welcome.
I had an experience similar to that in Hawaii, and it was the second or third time after I'd swim with dolphins,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
I
because you
got
lived in Hawaii for several years.
2 years
2 years.
consistently, and then I've kind of come back and forth. But I got out of the water, and there's this very kind of like dreamlike experience where you remember everything that just happened, but your mind is unsure if it was really real, even though you know it just happened. Um, and I could feel my heart. It was at a relatively slow rhythm, but
Mhm.
it was the drum of it was so deep, almost like how it'll pound when it's moving really fast
Yeah.
after you. But yeah, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before in that way. And I had a very similar realization where I was like, I've never talked to my heart. Um,
Doesn't it seem crazy when you realize you're like, oh my God,
yeah,
like, I can't
yeah.
believe
I
I
was
can't
like,
believe.
oh, it's myself. It's more of me. It's the door to the cosmos.
Mhm.
It's my connection to source. It's the embodiment of my imagination, of my essence. It was this and also again kind of that almost like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Like what? How did I not see that? And yeah, I just sat there and just kind of felt it in a way, and then was still kind of coated in the energy of the dolphins. So
Yeah.
very kind of quickly felt this like, oh, it's all good. You are always in connection and contact with it, but now
Right.
you get to do it that much more consciously.
That's right.
Um, and yeah, and it has been something that I go
That's
back
awesome.
to. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a beautiful idea of permission slip or meditation or
Yeah.
um, you know, different ways that we can all begin to access the communication with our hearts more
Yeah.
consciously. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's great.
You reminded me with what you said, and I that's what prompted me
Mm,
to. I was like, oh, but I wanted to, I'm excited for this question
mm,
because you have such a unique experience, but I love asking my guests this, particularly my guests who do what you do. When if you could whisper into the ears of every human on the planet,
mm,
and with the intention of giving them a greater experience of joy on this planet, and a greater
mm,
expansion of themselves and realization of themselves. You
mm,
know, what would you whisper? What would you tell them?
mm. Ooh, that's a good one. Um, that we are love and power itself, not even reminding people that you're powerful. We are the energy of power itself. We are the energy of worth itself. Um, and that there's always a different way to play a scene or to live our story. That there is a level of framework we are operating from, but just like an actor in a show, there's infinite ways of how we choose to say and express each line. And that inherently, the story itself, in a way, or um, the creation of what's happening, in a way, is a type of dream,
Mhm.
is a simulation, is a play. And we are the ones that, through our choices and our actions, give the meaning to it. And so we are the power of love the energy of power itself that is birthing the meaning of our own individual existences.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. That is beautifully put.
Thank you.
And I agree wholeheartedly. We really are, you know, and a lot of people love looking for signs. And of course, people who look for signs usually see them, but at the same time, don't forget that you get to decide what that sign means, you know, for you. Don't let anyone tell you different, because you're the creator. You get to decide. But
Absolutely.
no, that was a beautiful answer, Gita. And
Thank you.
listen, I'm so grateful for your time and that we got a chance to do this. And it's so funny that I've been thinking about reaching out to you for so long, and then, you know, one thing led to another, and I was like, oh, you know what? Where has Gita been? Like, let me just see what's up, you know, and then it worked out. Today worked out really well.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, and again, thank you so much for inviting me. And like always, it's all about the timing, which worked out perfectly. And yeah, I've been taking a little bit of a break from social media and sharing stuff. I had a lot of things that went on in my personal life that I'm working towards sharing. I really enjoy doing these different vlogs and being very authentic and showing how I utilize the information from the hybrids to help me in my life. So I'll be playing catch up and jumping around on my timelines a little bit and sharing.
I look forward to it. Yeah. And, you know, we're going to include a link to your website. Cool. Gita has a YouTube channel. She's got a bunch of stuff. And so you'll be able to find a lot more stuff on her. Should you be interested, I know I would be, in the video description. So we'll keep everyone posted, and I'll be in touch with you, Gita, when we're gonna premiere this episode again. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. You are
so welcome. It was my absolute joy, and thank you so much for your presence and your heart and your co-creation and participation.
You're welcome. I wish I was there to give you a big hug, but I'm giving you a digital hug right now. Thank you so much. You're a sweetheart. You take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. All right. Aloha.
Aloha.